Hey there, I am back with another painted Pokemon card video. This time I am working on a Vulpix card. This card came out in the set Neo Destiny and was number 91 out of 105. This set debuted February 28th, 2002 in America and other English-speaking countries, and in Japan it released March 9th, 2001, so almost an entire year before this set came to America. Now, this card was originally illustrated by Masako Yamashita, and I'm not sure if they were male or female, so I'm just gonna be calling them they from here on out. But I have a lot to say about this artist, actually, because I find them really interesting. So a lot of my prep work for this card, I'm just gonna be talking about this artist, so you can just skip this if you're not interested. So to start off, this illustrator has created artwork for 26 cards that I could find. Some of them were only available in Japan and had Japanese artworks, and were never printed with an English release or anything. Now, the first set that I could find that they worked on was the Japanese Vending Machine series set, and it was the third installment of that set. And again, this set was only released in Japan, it never saw an English debut. And you actually bought these cards in vending machines, and they would print out a big sheet of Pokemon cards that were upside down, and you would peel them off, and that's how you would get the card from the set. So they illustrated 3 or 4 cards for that set, and then they continued working for the Pokemon Company up until Skyridge set in 2002, and that is the last time they have illustrated a card for the TCG that I could find. However, they were recently attributed to a card that was a reprint of a Bellsprout. And this Bellsprout card was originally printed for Aquapolis in 2002, but was later reprinted for Celestial Storm in 2018. And it has the exact same artwork, it's cropped a little differently, and the HP was changed. But the attack, and I believe everything else is the exact same. And you can see Masako is given credit at the bottom of that card as well. Now, what I find most interesting about this artist is that their style changed quite a bit. Early on, the very first card I could find from this guy or girl was a Kingler card from the Vending Machine series set. And now this Kingler looks almost digital. It is mostly lineless, and it has very geometrical shapes and a pretty abstract background, which, comparing this to the Vulpix I'm working on, is an entirely different style than what we're used to seeing from this artist. And then another card that they created for this set was this Hypno. Here you see that they've gone a kind of different route. You still see this almost digital looking cell shaded style, but the outlines are extremely dark and bold and vibrant. The forms are all outlined, and the Hypno barely even fits into the card box, the art frame, which is almost kind of disturbing. Like, this art has a very weird feel to it, and I honestly really like that, and it's strange that they changed their style so much from this type of card. And then down the road a little bit with the Neo Revelation set, which is the set right before this Vulpix released. They worked on 3 or 4 cards, and it became apparent that they started preferring a more watercolor style, a more traditional way of coloring their art. Most of the colors were rather muted. There was still a sense of outline to the forms. However, with Golbat especially, you can tell they're somewhat toned down. They're not nearly as bold as that Hypno. And these Pokemon both were drawn in an action scene. They were performing some kind of attack or in some sort. There's motion in both of these cards. And finally, we come to Neo Destiny, which is where their style seems to have fully developed. Their cards almost look like storybook illustrations now. They are light, they have pastel colors, soft brush strokes, the line work has softened even more. The backgrounds are all very watercolor-esque and bright. The Pokemon are more so interacting with their environment now, rather than just overlaid on top of a standard background. You can see them climbing on trees and interacting with water and digging through the ground and such. And they were always fully in frame. I think there's one exception with a Goldeen card where part of her tail was off of the art box, but they're almost always fully in frame. And this style actually continued with this artist up until they quit making cards, up through Skyridge, so ever since then, they stuck with this watercolor style and produced a dozen or so cards like this. So yeah, I just thought it was really interesting to come across an artist who is no longer working, that I can find, for the Pokemon Company illustrating cards, and how much their art style continued to grow and develop throughout their employment. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys. I hope y'all found it as enjoyable as I did. So now back to the actual card painting. I intended on keeping with that storybook looking theme, and actually got a lot of inspiration from Studio Ghibli concept art, which I tend to draw from Studio Ghibli a lot, but I figured this card was perfect for that style. So I opted to go with a pretty naturalistic looking scene with the environment. However, I did want it to look as though there had been some human interaction. I didn't want to do just a flat hill, because then 90% of the card would be this grass, and it just didn't seem super interesting to me. So I wanted to create some layers and some depth. And the only way I could really think of to do that was to add some sort of landscaping. So a lot of times with Studio Ghibli especially, you'll notice that there's a lot of man-made or human interaction with the landscape. And so I chose to follow that path and added some masonry or stonework to this landscape. And I did that by introducing a staircase that was created out of stone, and then I added some boulders that appear to be placed by people. They don't look very natural in this environment, like they don't seem to have originated here. But rather, I wanted them to look like they were placed merely for aesthetics. Vulpix, at least in the anime, always seemed more of a metropolitan type Pokemon. They always seemed like they wanted to hang out with humans and not necessarily just exist in the wild, which I'm sure they do, but at least in the anime it seemed like they were always with a human companion. So I figured placing this Vulpix in kind of a park-like area would fit the mood more appropriately. For the boulders, I chose really warm colors. These oranges and tans are just made with black, white, and then either brown or yellow. But I did also choose to do some really cool colors to better contrast how warm this area felt. So in my shadows, you will see I'm using a lot of blues to darken the areas, and this blue also complements the orange tones that I used on the highlights. So it helps to make them feel even brighter and more warm. And you can also see that I'm heavily diluting my paints while working on these boulders and the grass. And this is just to better recreate that watercolor look of the original artwork. This tree took a ton of layers. I say this a lot, but yellow is a really transparent color, so usually what I end up doing is starting with a few coats of white to really hide the art box lines and any of the text that might bleed through, and then I just slowly work it up into yellow and orange. I did consider adding some leaves and branches to the top of this tree. However, I felt the card was getting a little too claustrophobic and I had a little too much going on in the foreground. So I actually chose to not include any type of treetop in this card. I'm sure one exists. It's probably just really, really, really tall tree and it's way up there and you can't even see it. So at the very end here, I'm just adding in some more of these little knots and various details onto the trunk of this tree, and further outlining it to match the rest of the art. And that about wraps it up for this Vulpix. I think this is a really cute card, I love how it turned out, and hopefully you guys do too. But if you enjoyed that and you want to see more, like I always say, there's a lot of stuff down in my description for you to check out. Also, if you're ever interested in what materials I am using and I don't just outright say what I'm using in the video, you can always check my description for that information too. But until next time, I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.